Hello, welcome back to the next lesson. We're going to continue working through Act 2, finish this act, and get into Act 3. So we have a lot of work to do, so let's get busy. So at scene 5, we go back to Juliet. And you're noticing it's going back and forth. Juliet, Romeo, Romeo, Juliet, back and forth like that. Very well organized. So we have Juliet here in scene 5 of Act 2, and she's waiting for the nurse to come back with news. And she's very impatient. Here's what she says about the nurse in line 4 of scene 5. Oh, she is lame. That's not nice. Go down a little further to line 16. Old folks, many feign as they were dead. Not very nice from Juliet. She's very impatient and not very nice. But watch this shift in her tone when the nurse comes in. This is at line 18. Juliet says, oh God, she comes. Oh, honey, nurse. And then line 21. Now, good, sweet nurse. Shift in tone. Now look at over here on line 54. Sweet, sweet, sweet nurse. We really get the sense that Juliet is a young girl begging for something, but when her parents are not around, or her nurse, she's like, oh, I hate them, right? Very funny. What we also see here is that Juliet has what we might think of as her tragic flaw. I've been trying to locate her tragic flaw. Romeo's maybe was confidence or youth. Juliet is young too, but also Juliet is very impatient. We see this on line 29. Juliet saying, nurse, nurse, tell me the news, tell me the news. What happened, what happened? And the nurse says, Jesu, what haste? Haste, what speed? Can you not stay a while? Can you not wait a while? Do you not see I'm out of breath? I love what Juliet says back to her. How art thou out of breath when thou hast breath to say to me that thou art out of breath? Very funny. The excuse that thou dost make in this delay is longer than the tale thou dost excuse. You're taking so long to tell me you can't tell me, you could have already told me. Very impatient, right? So the nurse says something to her that's some advice that she doesn't take. The nurse is very much like the friar, if you notice their functions in the text. They give advice that the young people do not take, and yet they help them. The nurse says to her, well, you have made a simple choice. You chose Romeo. You know not how to choose a man. Romeo? No, not he. Though his face be better than any man's. Okay, I know Romeo's good looking, but he's not a very good choice for a husband. And Juliet says back to her, no, no. This is line 46. But all this did I know before. What says he of our marriage? So the nurse gives advice, and Juliet does not take it. Then the nurse says to her on line 63, are you so hot? And line 70, now comes in the wanton blood. Again, that idea of you're impatient, you won't wait around for things. And maybe it is this impatience of Juliet that leads to her downfall, much like Romeo. The next scene, we go back to Romeo again. And Romeo is talking to the friar about his plan, and Friar Lawrence gives very similar advice. In line 9, he says, these violent delights have violent ends. The sweetest honey is loathsome in his own deliciousness. And then line 14, therefore, love moderately. Now notice Friar Lawrence uses that word therefore, and previously he used the word therefore. This is creating a character that is very logical, very wise. And what he says here makes sense. Whenever you love too much, these violent passions, they do lead to violent ends. And there's a type of love here that is kind of like the love that Romeo and Juliet want, which is the love of the sun, or something that's in moderation. But in this play, the sun is not in moderation. It's hot. And that's what we find out in Act 3. It's July, the hottest month of the year. This is not a time when you can love moderately, perhaps. And I also think there's something interesting that Friar Lawrence says here as well. On line 20, Juliet enters. They're about to get married. And he says, you cannot hear her coming, so light of foot. So light is vanity. Line 20, vanity. Now, something that you might not be aware of, but the word vanity comes from a Hebrew word, hebel. And hebel means fog. So there's this sense that both these characters are vain, but they're vain that they have a fog around them that they can't see clearly. They can't be patient. They can't think ahead about things. And later, when Romeo gets banished, Friar Lawrence says, the world is big, but Romeo has a fog. He says, there is no world beyond Verona's walls. They're very short-sighted, like young people are. They don't know. Sometimes you have to wait to get what you want. That's what adults know. So I like that word, vanity, and we'll see it come up again later in the play. And then they're going to get married. So this is the very end of the act. And Romeo and Juliet say two very different things. Here's Romeo's lines, line 24. Ah, Juliet, if the measure of thy joy be heaped like mine, if you love as much as I do, and that thy skill be more to blazon it, if you could speak about it, then sweeten with thy breath this neighbor air, and let rich music's tongue unfold the imagined happiness that both receive in either by this dear encounter. If you love as much as I do, tell me about it, please. But look to what Juliet says. Conceit, that means imagination, more rich in matter than in words, brags of his substance, not of ornament. They are but beggars that can count their worth. But my true love is grown to such excess, I cannot sum up some of half my wealth. So Romeo is a great talker. We know that he talks well. But here Juliet is challenging that idea. She's saying, when you love someone so much, you actually cannot put it into words. I think this is an interesting idea that we can pause on for a moment about language. There's a famous idea that you can think of language as being a skin on our bodies. Because the skin on our bodies is a point of contact with the world. We can hold someone's hand. We can embrace them with our bodies, our skin. Even though our skin is a point of contact, it's also a point of separation. My skin, my body, is what keeps me separate from you. This is like language. Language is a point of contact between people. But also, it's a point of separation, because sometimes I can't express myself, or sometimes you don't know what I mean by what I say. I think we see this clearly in what Juliet says. Okay, so now they're married. This is pretty happy. So it kind of marks the climax of the play. Marriage, happiness, or they should be. But we know this is a tragedy, so it can't work out very well. And Act 3 is going to introduce the major conflict of the play. There is a conflict of the Montagues and the Capulets, but they overcame that obstacle. They climbed over that wall, and they got married. But now in Act 3, we have something that they can't quite overcome. Act 3 is very much like Act 1, Scene 1. It's almost exactly the same. We could say it's parallel to Act 1, or that it's analogous to Act 1. Because in Act 1, we had Samson and Gregory on the stage talking about, yeah, if they come fight me, I'll fight them. And now we have Mercutio and Benvolio, and they're saying, yes, if they come fight me, I'll fight them. It's the same. And what they say is, you can see it on, there's a cool line actually from Mercutio. He says, thou? Why, thou wilt quarrel with a man that hath a hair more or a hair less on his beard than thou hast. Thou wilt quarrel with a man for cracking nuts, having no other reason, but because thou hast hazel eyes. You'll fight for any reason at all. And then what happens? Tybalt comes on the stage. Tybalt, the prince of cats, the very good fighter. Now there's time to have a fight. When he comes on, Mercutio tries to start a fight with him. And the way he tries to instigate the fight is through a literary device. This is kind of a tough one. It's called catachresis. Catachresis, Shakespeare uses it for comedy most of the time, but here it's used, interestingly, to start a fight. A catachresis is when I use the wrong word. That's all. Here, it's that Mercutio misunderstands, purposefully misunderstands a word to start the fight. This happens on line 43, I think? 44. Tybalt says to Mercutio, Mercutio, thou consortest with Romeo. Now, consortus means you're associated with him, you know him. But consort also means to be a musician. So Mercutio misunderstands it and says, consort? What, dost thou make us minstrels, musicians? That's an insult. And thou make minstrels of us? Look to hear nothing but discords. Here's my fiddlestick. Here's that shall make you dance. And you can imagine he's got the sword out. So Mercutio purposefully does this to start the fight, uses a catachresis. Now Romeo comes in, and this is where we have another technique. It's called dramatic irony. Dramatic irony is where the audience knows something that the players do not. We know that Romeo and Juliet are married, which means that Romeo is cousins with Tybalt, means they're family. So when Tybalt challenges Romeo Then Romeo says, Tybalt, this is line 61, the reason that I have to love thee doth much excuse the appertaining rage. Tybalt has no idea what he's talking about. Boy, this shall not make excuse the injuries thou hast done to me. And Romeo says, I love thee, I love thee. But Tybalt doesn't know why he's saying this. And neither does Mercutio. In line 72, Mercutio says, O calm, dishonorable, vile submission. He thinks that Romeo has betrayed his trust of hating that family, because Mercutio doesn't know that Romeo has married Juliet. And this is when the fight breaks out between Mercutio and Tybalt. And Romeo tries to stop it. And Mercutio's angry at both of them. And Mercutio gets wounded. This is line 84, when Romeo tries to stop the fighting and Mercutio is wounded. And then Mercutio cries out, a plague on both your houses. He says that 3 times. Line 90, a plague on both your houses. Line 99, line 99, a plague on both your houses. And he says it again on line 106, a plague on both your houses. Why does he have this emotional outburst? This is an expert usage of dramatic irony. Mercutio thinks that his best friend Romeo has betrayed him. Okay, let's stop there for now, and we're going to see what happens after this horrific scene where Mercutio has died.